This is not another top 10 haunted houses list read off a website. No jump scares, no fake ghost footage, just real places, real history, and real records. The creepiest corners of Florida, ranked by how deep the story actually goes. Some are legends locals still argue about. Some are documented tragedies the state tried to forget. By the time we hit number 1, you'll understand why creepy in Florida is not always about ghosts. Sometimes the scariest thing is what actually happened. Number 3 involves a building where children were sent to get well, and many never left. Let's get into it. Before we start, hit the like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell, because this list only gets darker as the numbers get smaller, and number 1 is the kind of story you'll want to send to someone. Let's get into it. We start easy, almost fun. Spook Hill sounds like a name somebody made up for a haunted hayride, and when you first pull up, that is exactly the vibe. A quiet residential road, a painted sign, families lining up in their cars. But here's the twist. You put your car in neutral at the bottom of the hill, take your foot off the brake, and the car rolls backward, uphill, against gravity. People have been doing it for 100 years, and it still doesn't make sense the first time you see it. The legend says a Seminole chief and a giant alligator fought here, and the chief's spirit still tugs cars up the slope. The science says it's a gravity hill optical illusion. The horizon line tricks your eye. Both explanations have been told here for a century. Both are still repeated at the sign today. That is the perfect Florida starter. A harmless roadside stop that quietly refuses to obey the rules. Nobody gets hurt at Spook Hill, but it sets the tone for everything coming. In Florida, the ground itself does not always play fair. Now we go deeper into the swamp, literally. The Everglades is 1.5 million acres of sawgrass, black water, and silence. From the highway, it looks like scenery. Up close, it is one of the last truly wild places in America, and people disappear in it. Locals have another reason to stay out of the tree line. They call it the Skunk Ape, Florida's answer to Bigfoot, 7 feet tall, covered in matted hair, and named for a smell so foul that hunters swear they smell it before they ever see it. Sightings go back generations. There's a research headquarters on Tamamama Trail dedicated to it. Is it real? No verified evidence exists. But here's the part that isn't folklore. The Everglades genuinely swallows people. Airboat accidents, hikers who wander off trail, small planes that go down and are never found in the muck. The swamp does not need a monster to be dangerous. That is the warning in the Everglades. The scary story that this is a place where the land itself can make a person vanish, and no legend required. Moving south now to something a man built with his bare hands. Coral Castle. More than 1,100 tons of oolite limestone, carved and stacked into walls, thrones, a working sundial, and a 9-ton gate so perfectly balanced a child could push it open with one finger. Now the reversal. The man who built it, a Latvian immigrant named Edward Leedskanen, stood about 5 feet tall and weighed roughly 100 pounds. He worked alone. At night, he refused to let anyone watch. When people asked how one small man moved multi-ton blocks with no modern machinery, he only said he understood the secrets of the pyramids. He took that secret to his grave in 1951. The theories range from clever livers and pulleys to magnetism to things that don't belong in a serious video. The truth is, nobody documented it, because he made sure of that. So what's left is a monument built by one man, by hand in the dark, for a woman who had left him in Latvia, a place he called Rockgate, built out of heartbreak. That is what makes Coral Castle creepy, not a ghost. An obsession carved in stone that we still can't reverse engineer. Now we head to the water, where the danger is alive. Silver Springs near Ocklawaha is one of the most beautiful spots in the state. Crystal water, glass-bottom boats, the postcard version of natural Florida. Then something moves in the trees. Monkeys, wild rhesus macaques, hundreds of them, swinging through a Florida forest where no monkey should exist. Here's the reversal. They were released decades ago. The story goes a tour operator put a few on an island in the 1930s to add jungle atmosphere, not realizing rhesus macaques swim. They spread. Today, biologists estimate hundreds roam Central Florida. And here's the evidence that turns a cute story dark. A significant share of these monkeys carry herpes B, a virus that is largely harmless to them and potentially fatal to humans. Health officials have publicly warned people not to approach or feed them. A single bite or scratch, a little saliva, and you are in a genuine medical emergency. That is the trade with Silver Springs. It looks like a petting zoo daydream. It is actually an unmanaged population of disease-carrying wild primates in a state park. Beautiful from the boat. Do not get out and chase the photo. Now we go somewhere much smaller and much stranger. In a museum in Key West sits a child's doll behind glass, sailor suit, stuffed with straw, over 100 years old. His name is Robert, and people write him letters begging his forgiveness. Expectation, it's just an old toy. Reversal, the staff will tell you, straight-faced, that you must ask Robert's permission before you photograph him. Tourists who mock him or skip the courtesy report, their cameras failing, their luck turning, accidents on the way home. The walls around the case are covered in handwritten apology letters from visitors who believe they offended him. The origin story, given to a boy named Robert Eugene Otto around 1904, the family claimed the doll moved on its own, that they heard it giggling, that the boy blamed Robert when things went wrong in the house. Is it a curse, or is it a century of suggestion feeding on itself? Nobody can prove it either way. But here's what's undeniable. A straw doll has generated so much genuine fear that grown adults mail written apologies to a museum. That is the creepiest kind of power, the one that lives entirely in people's heads and never lets go. 9 down. If you're still with me, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, because the back half of this list leaves the ghost stories behind and gets into things that actually happened. Drive inland to Volusia County, and you reach a town where the phone book reads like the cast of a seance. Cassadaga, founded in 1894 as a spiritualist camp, it is home to certified mediums, healers, and psychics, a whole community built around talking to the dead. The reversal is that it's completely real and completely legal, a registered spiritualist community that has operated for more than a century. People come from across the country for readings, and then there's the Devil's Chair. In a cemetery near town sits a brick bench beside a grave. Legend says if you leave an unopened beer on it overnight, it'll be empty by morning, and that if you sit in it after dark, the devil himself will whisper to you. Locals have tested it for decades. That is Cassadaga. A town that made a peaceful business out of the afterlife. Wrapped around a graveyard chair, nobody wants to sit in at midnight, charming in daylight. Something else entirely once the sun drops. Now we get in the car and drive a road you've probably already driven without knowing what's under it. Interstate 4 is one of the busiest highways in Florida. Millions of cars a year between Tampa and Daytona. Most drivers never notice the quarter-mile stretch near Sanford where the accidents pile up and the phones go haywire. Here's the history most people don't know. Long before the highway, this land held a tiny settlement and a small family burial plot, 4 graves from a yellow fever outbreak in the early 1900s. When I-4 was built in the late 1950s, crews reportedly laid the roadbed directly over that ground instead of moving the graves. The evidence is anecdotal but relentless, an unusually high cluster of crashes on that short segment, drivers reporting radio static and phantom cell interference, troopers who quietly call it what locals call it, the dead zone. It's even tied by legend to the exact spot a hurricane made landfall. Is it cursed? Or is it a bad curve with heavy traffic and a good story? I'm not going to pretend the paranormal is proven, but 4 graves paved over by a highway under one of the deadliest short stretches of road in the state. That's the kind of coincidence that makes your hands tighten on the wheel. Now we go north to a house where the bullet holes are still real. On a lake in Marianna County stands a modest 2-story house that looks like any old fishing retreat. It is one of the most shot-up crime scenes in American history. On January 16, 1935, the FBI surrounded this house hunting the Barker Karpis gang. Inside were Kate Ma Barker and her son Fred. What followed was one of the longest gunfights in FBI history. Roughly 4 hours, thousands of rounds fired into the walls. When the silence finally came, Ma Barker and her son were dead. The evidence is still in the wood. For decades, the house sat with bullet holes preserved in its walls. It was considered so historically significant that the entire structure was later moved and preserved. That is the creepy part. This isn't a legend. It's a house where a mother and son were killed in a hail of federal gunfire, and the scars are physical. You can stand where it happened. Some places are haunted by stories. This one is haunted by ballistics. Now we cross into the Panhandle to a bridge and a burning woman. Near Marianna, in the North Florida woods, an old iron frame bridge crosses the Chippewa River. It is one of the oldest bridges in the state, and it comes with one of its oldest ghost stories. The legend is Elizabeth Jane Bellamy. As the story goes, this young bride's dress caught fire in the 1830s. Some versions say it knocked over a candle at her own celebration, and she burned to death. For nearly 2 centuries, people have reported a woman in flames drifting through the swamp near the bridge at dusk. Here's the honest reversal, because this channel doesn't sell you fake history. Researchers have shown the fire version is largely folklore. The real Elizabeth Jane most likely died of illness. The struggle was real. The ghost story grew on top of it. But that's what makes it haunting in a different way. Nearly 200 years of people swearing they've seen a burning woman in the trees, built on a real young woman's early death, and a story that refused to die with her. Both are true, the myth and the grief underneath it. 2 spots left. And these last 2 are where creepy stops being folklore. Before we get to the top 2, if this video has kept you watching this long, subscribe. If you want the real Florida, not the theme park version, because the final 2 are documented. They are dark, and number 1 is a place the state of Florida actually tried to close, cover, and forget. In a quiet suburban park in Port St. Lucie stands an old oak locals call the Devil's Tree. Kids play nearby. Most have no idea what happened here. In the early 1970s, this tree became a dumping ground for the victims of Gerard Schaefer, a former sheriff's deputy who became one of the most notorious killers in Florida history. He used his position to lure young women, and the remains of 2 of his victims were found near this tree. The evidence is court record, not legend. Schaefer was convicted and later killed in prison, but the tree stayed. For years, people said chainsaws broke when they tried to cut it down. That fires wouldn't take that the branches where the bodies were found could not be removed. I want to be careful here, because 2 real families lost daughters at this tree. This is not a fun ghost story. It is a memorial to a genuine tragedy that a killer with a badge carried out. The creepiest thing about the Devil's Tree isn't the supernatural, it's that the monster was a lawman, and the evidence is in a case file. That is the warning, and it takes us to a place built to heal children. Across Florida, the name Sunland still makes older residents go quiet. These were state institutions. One of the most infamous sat in Tallahassee, built originally as tuberculosis hospitals, and later used to house children with disabilities. The expectation was care, a place to get well. The reversal is one of the darkest chapters in the state's institutional history. Overcrowding, understaffing, allegations of neglect, and a heartbreaking number of children who entered and never came home. For decades after the buildings were abandoned, teenagers dared each other to go inside the crumbling wards. The legend that grew was a ghost boy called Ovaltine, a child said to have died there who still wanders the halls. But strip the ghost story away, and the real horror remains. These were children sent somewhere to be cared for, who died in conditions the state later had to answer for. That's the pattern this list keeps hitting. The scariest places in Florida aren't the ones with ghosts. They're the ones where real people, often the most vulnerable people, were failed. Now the number 2 spot, the oldest and most haunted city in America. Founded in 1565, St. Augustine is the oldest continuously occupied European-founded city in the United States. Cobblestone streets, a Spanish fort, a lighthouse on the water. Gorgeous. It is also, by almost every ranking, the most haunted city in America. Here's why the ghost stories have so much to feed on. 450 plus years of history means centuries of death stacked on the same few blocks. Spanish soldiers, yellow fever epidemics that killed thousands, a fort with dungeons, a lighthouse where 2 young girls drowned during its construction in the 1870s. Their laughter, people say, still echoes on the tower stairs. The old Spanish military hospital, the lighthouse, the fort. Everyone has documented deaths underneath the legend. Ghost tours run nightly and never run out of material because unlike most haunted attractions, the body count here is real and it's in the historical record. That's what earns St. Augustine the number 2 spot. It's not one haunted house. It's an entire beautiful city built on 4.5 centuries of the dead. And still, it is not the creepiest thing in Florida because the number 1 spot isn't a legend at all. It's a crime scene the size of a campus. We end in Marianna, at a place that operated for over a century and became the darkest story in the state. The Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys opened around 1900 as a reform school, a place troubled and orphaned boys were sent to be straightened out. On paper, rehabilitation. In reality, for generations of boys, it was something else entirely. Survivors, grown men now, who call themselves the White House Boys, after a small white building on the grounds, have described systematic beatings, abuse, and boys who were taken away and simply never seen again. For decades, their accounts were dismissed. Then came the evidence. When university researchers surveyed the property after it finally closed in 2011, they did not find a handful of graves. They identified the remains of at least 55 boys buried across the grounds, many in unmarked graves, some in areas that were never recorded as a cemetery at all. Boys whose families were told they had run away. Boys whose parents spent their whole lives not knowing. That is the number 1 creepiest side of Florida, and it is not a ghost. It is real. It is documented. It is families who are still right now trying to identify a son from bone fragments in a field. Good boys were sent here, scared boys. Boys who should have gone home. Instead, the ground kept them, and the state looked away for 100 years. That is not a spooky story to tell around a fire. That is a warning about what happens when no one is watching the people in charge, and that is the point of this whole list. Florida's creepiest side isn't the doll, or the swamp monster, or the hill that rolls the wrong way. It's the places where something real happened, and almost no one was warned. So there it is, 13 creepiest sides of Florida, from Spook Hill and the Skunk Ape, to Coral Castle, the monkeys of Silver Springs, Robert the Doll, Cassadaga, the Faux d'Abrizone, the Maud Barker House, Bellamy Bridge, the Devil's Tree, Sunland, St. Augustine, and the Boys of Dozier. Some of these are legends people will argue about forever. Some are documented history that should never be forgotten. If one of these surprised you, drop it in the comments. If you've been to any of them, tell me what the videos always get wrong. And if you want more of the real Florida, the version the brochures leave out, subscribe and hit the bell. We are just getting started. See you in the next one.